Literally, all he had to say was that this was a horrible tragedy, that the government would do everything in its power to get answers for those families that were affected by the tragedy, and that they are there in support of them. That's it.
Hello guys, and welcome back to our channel. Now in today's video, I wanted to take a look at Donald Trump's latest remarks, which have left Americans stunned and outraged. Now in the wake of the devastating plane crash that claimed 67 lives, Trump has sparked controversy by blaming diversity, equity, and inclusion DEI initiatives for the tragedy. Without presenting any evidence, he alleged that lowered standards in hiring practices were responsible for the crash. Now, Trump's comments quickly escalated into a scathing critique of diversity hiring, with him pointing fingers at various targets, including the helicopter's pilot, air traffic control Joe Biden, and other Democrats. He even labeled the former transportation secretary a disaster. Now, the backlash has been swift and severe, with many expressing disgust and outrage over Trump's comments. As the nation grapples with the aftermath of this tragedy, people are speaking out against Trump's divisive rhetoric. Now, in this video, we'll explore the reactions of different individuals and examine the implications of Trump's words and the impact they've had on this conversation. So with that said, let's take a look at these videos as different people react. I will be right back.
The President of the United States just blamed people with intellectual disabilities for the plane crash that unalived 60 people.
My administration will set the highest possible bar for aviation safety. We have to have our smartest people. It doesn't matter what they look like, how they speak, who they are. It matters intellect, talent, the word talent. You have to be talented, naturally talented geniuses. You can't have regular people doing that job. They won't be able to do it. But we'll restore faith in American air travel. I'll have more to say about that. I do want to point out that various articles that appeared prior to my entering office, and here's one. The FAA's diversity push includes focus on hiring people with severe intellectual and psychiatric disabilities. That is amazing. And then it says FAA says people with severe disabilities are most underrepresented segment of the workforce, that they want them in and they want them. They can be air traffic controllers. I don't think so. This was in January 14th, so that was a week before I entered office. They put a big push to put diversity into the FAA's program. And then another article, the Federal Aviation Administration, this was before I got to office, recently, second term. The FAA is actively recruiting workers who suffer severe intellectual disabilities, psychiatric problems, and other mental and physical conditions under a diversity and inclusion hiring initiative spelled out on the agency's website. Can you imagine? These are people that are, actually their lives are shortened because of the stress that they have. Brilliant people have to be in those positions, and their lives are actually shortened, very substantially shortened, because of the stress, where you have many, many planes coming into one target, and you need a very special talent and a very special genius to be able to do it. Targeted disabilities are those disabilities that the federal government, as a matter of policy, has identified for special emphasis in recruitment and hiring. The FAA's website states they include hearing, vision, missing extremities, partial paralysis, complete paralysis, epilepsy, severe intellectual disability, psychiatric disability, and dwarfism all qualify for the position of a controller of airplanes pouring into our country, pouring into a little spot, a little dot on the map, a little runway. The initiative is part of the FAA's diversity and inclusion hiring plan. Think of that. The initiative is part of the FAA's diversity and inclusion hiring plan, which says diversity is integral to achieving FAA's mission of ensuring safe and efficient travel. I don't think so. I think it's just the opposite.
I'm simply disgusted right now. Donald Trump's response to the crash that took the lives of 67 people last night is one of the most abhorrent, horrific things that I've heard anyone say And for Donald Trump, that is a pretty high bar. He blamed Joe Biden. He blamed Pete Buttigieg. And then he blamed DEI for the crash. Not 24 hours after the bodies lay in the Potomac, and they're still recovering those bodies right now, Trump decided to go up there at the White House and blame Democrats and blame, quote unquote, DEI. The fact that Black Americans were working jobs in a particular industry. What are we doing? That's not how a president is supposed to act. A president is supposed to assure the American people. They're supposed to say, look, this is a tragic event and we will do everything in our power to help the victims. Not whatever the hell he just did.
Y'all president got on national television and said that the reason that there was a plane crash is because the FAA made a push, a DEI push, to hire people with intellectual disabilities and psychiatric problems. Y'all president. Oh, but he didn't stop there, because that wasn't enough. He then said that we need really, really intelligent people to be doing these jobs, suggesting that people who have intellectual disabilities and psychiatric problems are not intelligent or not capable of being intelligent. Is that what he just said on national television? I just also want to point out that we have no evidence has been released that anybody involved in this situation actually has a diagnosis. We don't know that to be a fact. He did an entire press conference about a plane crash where people lost family members, loved ones, and used that time to talk about people with intellectual disabilities and psychiatric problems and why DEI is a problem. Imagine you lost your loved one and this is what the president is on TV talking about. Y'all about to get me tight. I gotta.
Is there anything Trump won't blame on DEI? This is a serious topic, but I just can't. Two planes just crashed into each other in DC. Bodies being pulled out of the water. Families distraught. Trump goes on TV. He's like, that's because of diversity. He really blamed President Obama and President Biden. He's like, if you were bigots in the hiring process, this would have never happened. And I guess it has nothing at all to do with the fact that he fired people who were in key positions of aircraft safety. That has nothing to do with the planes crashing, but it definitely has something to do with Black people being president. He was like, truthfully, if women didn't exist near the plane, would have never crashed. No, but seriously, his argument is that they hired people who had intellectual disabilities, and that's why they crashed, because they were never qualified for the position. I know that it's probably hard for him to understand this as somebody with multiple failed businesses. So, he's not really used to being an owner or in charge of things that are successful. But that's just not how businesses work. Sorry, Books.
That man said, I'm not going over there to the site. You want me to go swimming? Do you?
That's a funny word. Drawer.
So Donald Trump just signed an executive order blaming Joe Biden, DEI, and woke policies for the fatal plane crash that happened last night. So in the Oval Office just now, Trump put his signature on a memorandum titled Immediate Assessment of Aviation Safety, which orders his transportation secretary and FAA administrator to, quote, undo all of the damage that was done by Biden, DEI, and woke policies. So this is straight up gaslighting from Donald Trump. He is blaming Biden, who is no longer president. He is blaming DEI, which has nothing to do with the crash. And he is blaming woke policies, which he can't even define, despite him being the president, who is currently overseeing the FAA and who signed orders last week to gut a key aviation safety committee, as well as firing several airline personnel. This is a distraction from the fact that he may be responsible for this crash, and so he's trying to shift the blame onto everybody else, but don't fall for it.
Raise your hand if you knew instantly that either the captain of the military helicopter or the captain of the American Airlines flight that collided last night over DC was a person of color, just based off of Trump's remarks at today's press conference. Raise your hand, because I knew instantly. I knew that it was going to be not only a person of color, but a person of Latino or Hispanic descent. You know how? Because at the top of the press conference, Trump nonchalantly, when he was rambling on and on about DEI hires, he said something about Hispanics really quickly. And that was my first red flag. And now we come to find out that the captain of the American Airlines flight is Jonathan Campos. Yes, you heard that right. Jonathan Campos. I thought I couldn't be more in shock after 9 days of this administration. But he, along with his vice president, his MTV Real World alum Secretary of Transportation, and that other guy that has a plethora of issues, got on stage at that press conference and kept saying this was a DEI issue. This tragedy, they're trying to pin it on someone, and someone that they consider a DEI hire. I pray for the family of Jonathan Campos. May he rest in peace. It is reprehensible. It is foul that they would blame this on diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. It's what is happening? First, they come for our most vulnerable community members, and now they're coming for some of our most accomplished U.S. citizen pilots, captains. I mean, what's next? I have no words.
It was DEI, right? DEI was the reason behind the tragic plane crash last night. That's what our commander-in-chief said. His commander-in-chief said last night. This is Ryan O'Hara. He was the pilot of the Black Hawk helicopter that crashed into the plane. So what I want to understand is, who is he talking about in this DEI blame game? Because we have one of three parties. We have the pilots of the airplane who are locked in on their landing. They're out. They're not at fault. They're not doing anything wrong. We have the air traffic controllers who communicated numerous times with O'Hara and told him, do you have visuals on this plane? Because they told him that plane was approaching. So then that leaves the third party, which unfortunately is Ryan O'Hara, who lost his life tragically. He apparently, from what I'm hearing from other pilots, is he apparently had visuals on the wrong plane, which is why he ended up crashing into the plane that was right in front of him. This is a tragedy. Let me be very clear. I'm not blaming him or anyone else, and neither should the president of the United States. What he should have done is offer condolences, say he's going to look into what happened, make sure it never happens again, and reiterate how safe air travel is in this country, because this is the first time something like this has happened since 2009. But instead of doing any of the numerous reasonable things a person would do in this situation, he fanned the flames of hate in order to deflect and blame someone else, anything to blame anyone else. And he also degraded our military personnel and potentially called Ryan O'Hara a DEI hire.
Did I just watch the President of the United States get up on the podium less than 24 hours after Americans have lost their lives due to something that his military did and sit there and blame DEI. What are you trying to say? He was bringing up people with no limbs, people that had dwarfism. He's going on about how icy, icy, icy the Potomac River is. Like, how disgusting do you have to be? Then he brings up President Obama. Then he brings up Pete Buttigieg. He's bringing up everyone, black, part of the LGBTQ community, women. So basically, all of us, we're not welcome. If you ask me, this is certainly looking like they went ahead and sacrificed 67 people in order to try to get the American people behind what they're doing. Instead of coming up there and trying to comfort the country, comfort the people that have lost their loved ones, he's going up there and immediately going on about his propaganda about having the best, the brightest, the mentally fit, when it's his military that did this. I'm sorry, what does DEI have to do with not being at the same height as a plane? What does that have to do with it? To me, that sounds like a training problem, an oversight problem, not a DEI problem. Whatever happened, if it was the pilot's fault, it's not his fault, his or her fault, because they were black, or because they were Hispanic, or because they were a woman, or because they were trans, or because they loved someone of the same, or because they were non-Christian, or because they had some sort of disability. That's not what made it their fault. If you voted for this man, I hope shame and disgust never leave you.
As an Army veteran, absolutely under no circumstance is a Black Hawk going to accidentally fly into a commercial jet. The call sign on that Black Hawk was PAT 25, Priority Air Transport. Makes me wonder what was on that flight, what was on that Black Hawk that was so important that it had to take off at that time. So we all know that Donald J. Trump was signing executive order after executive order. He did a blitzkrieg of executive orders, and one of them included firing the head of the TSA, the Coast Guard, and GUT's key aviation safety advisory committees. So let's go ahead and fire everybody, all the head honchos from all of these departments, and not replace them with someone to make that department work effectively. So on his second day after being inaugurated, he went ahead and quickly removed the Department of Homeland Security, firing the heads of the Transportation Security Administration and Coast Guard before their terms were up, and eliminated all the members of a key aviation security advisory group. So Donald J. Trump does not care about the people. He only cares about making money for himself and the rest of his billionaire cronies. He is dismantling this country, our government, little by little, trying to do it the constitutional way. He's removing the heads of all of these departments without replacing them. And if he does replace them, they're going to be replaced by people who are unfit and have no qualifications to sit that seat.
Now, President Donald Trump began his White House briefing Thursday with a moment of silence and a prayer for victims of Wednesday's crash at Reagan National Airport. But his remarks quickly became a diatribe against diversity hiring and his allegation, so far without evidence, that lowered standards were to blame for the crash. Now, Trump on Thursday variously pointed the finger at the helicopter's pilot, air traffic control, his predecessor Joe Biden, and other Democrats, including former Transportation Secretary, whom he labeled a disaster. Now, the cause of the crash is still unknown. Authorities are investigating and have not publicly identified the cause or said who might have been responsible for the collision of an American Airlines plane and a U.S. Army helicopter. Reporters on Thursday challenged Trump's claims. Now, Trump was asked repeatedly to explain why he was blaming federal diversity and inclusion promotion efforts for the crash. At one point, alleging that previous leadership had determined that the Federal Aviation Administration workforce was too palm color. He did not back up those claims, while also declaring it was still not clear the FAA or air traffic controllers were responsible for the crash. Are you saying this crash was somehow caused as a result of diversity hiring? And what evidence have you seen to support these claims? Now, Trump said it just could have been. we have a high standard. We've had a much higher standard than anybody else. And there are things where you have to go by brain power. You have to go by psychological quality, and psychological quality is a very important element of it. These are various very powerful tests that we put to use, and they were determined by Biden. And Biden went by a standard that seeks the exact opposite. So we don't know. But we do know that you had two planes at the same level. You had a helicopter and a plane. That shouldn't have happened. And we'll see. We're going to look into that, and we're going to see. But certainly for an air traffic controller, we want the brightest, the smartest, the sharpest. We want somebody that's psychologically superior. And that's what we're going to have. You have today blamed the diversity elements, but then told us that you weren't sure that the controllers made any mistake. You then said perhaps the helicopter pilots were the ones who made the mistake. It's all under investigation. Then the interviewer said, I understand that. That's why I'm trying to figure out how you can come to the conclusion right now that diversity had something to do with this crash. Then Trump said, because I have common sense, okay? And unfortunately, a lot of people don't. We want brilliant people doing this. This is a major chess game at the highest level. When you have 60 planes coming in during a short period of time, and they are all coming in different directions, and you are dealing with very high level computer work and very complex computers. Now, Trump was challenged on his claim that the FAA under Democratic presidents had promoted the hiring of people with disabilities. The page Trump referenced has existed on the FAA's website for a decade, including his first term. Now, we all know that Trump and his fellow Republicans have regularly attacked DEI programs in the federal government. His team has made undoing such programs a core part of their first days in office, saying they have divided Americans and weakened the country. And less than 24 hours after the first major U.S. air disaster in more than a decade, Trump, along with his secretaries of transportation and defense and his vice president, took turns hammering their point, even as they provided no evidence that federal hiring practices had any connection to this particular crash. Now, Trump said the hiring guidance for the FAA's diversity and inclusion program included preference for those with disabilities involving hearing, vision, missing extremities, partial paralysis, complete paralysis, epilepsy, severe intellectual disability, psychiatric disability, and dwarfism. Now, an archived version of the website for the FAA's diversity and inclusion hiring program that appears to have been taken down in December included a similar list. The agency was seeking people with targeted disabilities that the federal government was prioritizing for recruitment at the time, but it's unclear how that drive to make recruitment more diverse may have impacted the ranks of air traffic controllers, who President Trump said needed to all be naturally talented geniuses. The FAA has more than 35,000 employees, only a fraction of which perform that role. Now, in response to criticisms over diversity hiring practices last year, the agency released a statement asserting that all new hires must meet rigorous qualifications that vary by position. Now, the agency has faced criticism over a long-standing shortage of air traffic controllers, particularly after the COVID-19 pandemic caused massive disruptions in commercial air travel. Reports suggest that staffing levels at Reagan Airport on Wednesday night may have been compromised. In his remarks, Trump specifically blamed Biden administration transportation secretary, whom he described with an obscenity and said had run the department into the ground. The former transportation secretary defended his record on social media, calling Trump's comments despicable. As families grieve, Trump should be leading, not lying, he said. Senate Democrat leader Chuck Schumer also criticized Trump's comments. It's one thing for internet pundits to spew off conspiracies. It's another for the president of the United States to throw out idle speculation as bodies are still being recovered, he said. Now, once he departed from his prepared remarks, however, speculation was what President Trump seemed most interested in offering. Along with his condemnation of DEI policies, he offered extended discussion of the angles and elevation at which the two aircraft were flying, the weather conditions on Wednesday night, the temperature of the Potomac, and the behavior of the Army helicopter. We had a situation where we had a helicopter that had an ability to stop, he said. For some reason, it just kept going. But on Thursday evening, the White House doubled down on blaming his predecessor and DEI policies. The president signed a memorandum to end DEI efforts in the aviation sector and to review all hiring decisions and changes to safety protocols made during the Biden administration. He also signed an executive order to appoint a new head of the FAA. Two things were very clear from Trump's remarks on Thursday. The first is that his engineers to inject himself into a major news story is undiminished in his new term. And the second is that in his view, it is never too soon to inject policies into national tragedy and use it to attack opponents and advance his agenda. We have finally come to the end of the video, but what do you our viewers have to say? Share your thoughts, your views, your contributions as well in the comment section, and let's have a conversation there. Thank you for always watching, and see you in our next video as we bring you another video.